And now to talk more about this, we're joined by energy analyst Clive Mallinson. A very good evening to you, Mr. Mallinson. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the late edition.
Thanks, Mpiwe. Looking forward to chatting.
Indeed. Thank you so much for joining us. And first of all, what do you make of Minister Ramokgopa's call for Africa to reject decarbonisation if it comes at the expense of development? Is this perhaps a fair trade-off?
No, I don't believe it is a fair trade-off. Just a couple of things to comment on. The fact that 600 million Africans don't have access to electricity is shocking, but it has very little to do with the transition. The transition is all about moving those who do have electricity from electricity generated by primarily fossil fuels to energy generated by primarily renewable energy fuels. Now, if you don't have electricity to start with, then there's no transition. Transition means moving from one thing to another. So basically, the move to renewable energy holds out great hope for Africa, having gone through the last century and 2 decades with plenty of access to fossil fuel types in Africa, oil in Nigeria, Angola, coal in Botswana, South Africa. There's no reason why Africa should have been left behind on energy, except, as pointed out, through a lack of will. But to link this to the transition and blame it on the transition, in my opinion, is disingenuous. There's not a transition of those 600 million. There's an opportunity for them to have electricity for the first time. And that opportunity is a little bit like cell phone technology, where we can leapfrog the need to put long transmission lines all over Africa and run coal and gas and oil in order to supply people. We can supply at the local level on microgrids on a town and city basis. And that's the great hope, and that's what we need to be accelerating in. And in fact, that's what a lot of the countries in the global south are accelerating in. We've just been sidetracked by insisting that we be allowed to make use of fossil assets that we've got and that we haven't made use of for the last, 120 years for whatever reason.
Right. But then, Mr. Mallinson, do you believe this stance sort of reflects the broader sentiment amongst African energy policymakers, or is it a more, I would say, controversial position?
Well, I think blaming it on the transition is incorrect. We need to basically be really thankful that we're at a time in history where the transition is taking place. And in a sense, Africa can move from not having electricity supplied to that great number of people to doing it with electricity generated at source, so that we don't have to see transmission lines across the Great Savannah, the Serengeti, the plains of Tanzania. It would be brilliant to be able to generate electricity at source. And then, of course, in areas where there may be the need for industrialization, you can also do it with renewables, because these days storage is very cost competitive. And of course, Africa has a lot of hydro power. It has a lot of geothermal power. We seem to spend more time fighting with each other than we do on building stuff in many parts of Africa, I'm afraid to say.
Right. And having said that, then, how should we, and by we, I'm saying Africa, how should Africa then balance the urgent need for industrialization and economic growth with its climate commitments under the global frameworks like the Paris Agreement, for instance?
Well, it said in one of those statements, it said that we should do it with a modicum of social justice and environmental stewardship. My vision, and I'll focus on South Africa for the moment, is that a renewable fleet in South Africa by 2040 would cost the country approximately 250 billion rand less per year than what we currently have in our so-called integrated resource plan that has a lot of gas and nuclear in the build. So that's a starting point, 240 billion per year. But the real way to bring about transformation as we go through this technological transition is to find ways, and there are ways of actually empowering the people to actually own that new fleet. So I think it's very important to have distributed, widespread ownership of the new renewable energy fleet across Africa. So not just to be recipients of electricity, but actually to be owners of the fleets that are providing that electricity. And in that context, if the West are prepared to give us a combination of grants and highly concessional loans in order to achieve that, then what a pleasure. Because we shouldn't see this as a cost, but as an investment opportunity where the impact that electricity can have as being the very lifeblood of the economy can actually play its role. And to just supply people with small amounts of electricity to lift them out of energy poverty is not sufficient. We should be striving to bring about levels of electricity consumption per capita in Africa that begin to reflect levels of energy usage in other countries around the world. And at the moment, we're so far behind that we've got a huge amount of catching up to do.
Mr. Mallinson, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your time with us.
Thanks very much.
All right, that was energy analyst Clive Mallinson just talking to us and sharing with us his sentiments and comments about the Energy Minister, Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa's call that, Africa needs to reject decarbonisation if it comes at the expense of development.